The customer's factory is now ready to go, but we need to use it in our controllers. Now, that's pretty easy to do. Because it's registered with our module, we can simply come up to a controller and we can type the name of the factory, which is customer's factory. Now, we'll also have to come down and with our $inject, I mentioned earlier, we'll want to put it here too. That way, if this is renamed, it's going to be okay and it'll still find it because it'll use this. So from here, we now need a way to get customers. So let's say that we know we want to have a variable on our scope called customers, but I'm going to give it an empty array right now. What we can do is make a little init function. And I'm going to say when this first gets loaded, the controller first runs, I'm going to call init. And in here, we can now take our customer's factory and use it to fill this customer's property. So we could say scope.customers. And from here, we can say customer's factory dot, and now we can do get customers. Now, as mentioned, this is currently a synchronous call, but that'll get the job done for now. So that'll assign the customers in when we call the init. And now none of that information or logic is found anywhere in the controller. We're just going to reuse this factory to make it happen. So let's go ahead and try that out first. All right, and there we go. We now have some information. Now, if we go to view orders, we have nothing because we need to fix that up as well. So let's go ahead and head over there. And you can see when this one initializes, we grab the route param and then we loop through the customers to grab, but we don't have any customers at this point. So what I'm going to do is refactor this a little bit. Let's go ahead and we don't want the logic for finding the customer here. That's going to be the job of the factory. So what I'm going to do is come back to the factory. And let's come on down and we'll say factory.get customer, and then we'll pass in the customer ID that we found up on the route. Now what this is going to do is iterate through the customers. Let me fix this up a little bit. So now we'll just say customers instead of scope. And then if the customer we're iterating through, if the ID is equal to the customer ID passed in, then we know what the orders are, and we'll go ahead and we previously assigned those. But what we're going to do is just return the actual customer. So we're going to say return customers I here, and then we can get rid of the break. Now, if we don't find it, I'm just going to return an object literal that's kind of empty, or we could return null, whatever you'd like there. Okay, so now we have a way to get a customer. It's going to iterate through our customers, find it based on the ID passed in, and then return it out. Otherwise, we'll just give an empty one. So moving on back to the orders controller, in the init, we can now say that our orders, which I'm going to change up here, are going to be inside of a customer. So we're going to say that the customer right now is just null, but I'm going to go ahead and find it by using the customer factory. Now, of course, we need that factory here as well. So let's go ahead and add customers factory. And we'll go ahead and add it right here as the param for the minification issue. And now we're ready to go. So we can say customers factory dot get customer. And now we can pass in the customer ID that we have, and that'll update the customer. Now, we changed it a little bit though, because now we're going to write out not only the customer, but also the order. So I'm going to come over to the view and modify this just a little bit. And let's go up here, and there's a name property. So we'll say if it was Jim, we'd say Jim's orders. And this name is going to come from the customer object that I showed in the scope just a moment ago. So we're going to say customer.name, and for orders, it'll be customer.orders. Now again, that's because, going back to the controller here, we now have a customer property in the scope. We're going to bind to the customer name, and then the orders, we're actually grabbing, they're part of the customer. And that's all in the factory. Okay, so we've now injected in our factory, added the parameter here as appropriate, and then we're using the factory to actually go in and get a customer. So let's go ahead and go back to our main view here. And you'll notice that we now have our customers as expected, but when we click view orders, we now have orders and we can see the name. So we'll click on Z here and we should see Z's orders. There we go, there's the orders. All right, and now our controllers look a lot better, a lot cleaner, because now our controllers are only focused on the data that the view needs. And if we had any logic specific to just this controller, we could certainly put it here. But in this case, the customer's logic, we might need this in another view or another controller, so it makes sense to actually pull that out and put it into a factory so we can reuse that. So that's an example of how we can get started creating a custom factory and then injecting that factory into our controllers.